Good evening, good morning, and good day. This is the Race Sim Central podcast, your regular 7-monthly podcast that you can only just keep up with. With me today I have Tim Wheatley, hero of Race Sim Central, Simon Croft, regular person on this podcast, and new special guest star, Tero Dalberg, real life Finnish person.
Yeah. Hello. Hi.
How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Oh, and by the way, I'm John Denton. Yeah, doing all right, Simon.
Yeah, I'm just I'm on the countdown till end of next week and have some holiday and just give up on life for a bit.
Didn't that kind of shutdown begin like about a month ago? Like everyone just like stops working basically. That's how I always remember life in the UK. Is basically once it gets to November, everyone's like, "Yep, that's it." Hold on.
I feel like I never really picked up after January, to be honest.
Seems to be everybody except me these days. And Tero, are you excited to be on?
Yeah, it's gonna be my first time doing anything like this.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah.
So the big historic racing sim we're going to talk about today is Richard Burns Rally, which obviously everybody's heard of, but it was released in 2004 for Windows and PlayStation 2 and Xbox, I believe. Though quite how anybody played it with a PlayStation 2 controller, I do not know. Probably accounted for its relatively limited sales. It is what you could call the most hardcore rallying sim in existence, or arguably the only hardcore rallying sim in existence. What do you think about when somebody says Richard Burns Rally, Simon?
I think I agree with your latter suggestion there of arguably, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful to anyone else or other titles, but I think in some respects it's the only rally sim. It's certainly the only title that I would consider playing of the rally games that are out there, and it's the only one that hasn't ultimately been quite a big disappointment to me. I love it, and revisiting it recently, just in anticipation of this conversation, has only just reiterated how brilliant it is, even after all this time.
Yeah, it really stands up incredibly well. I mean, graphics-wise, obviously, it's a product of its time, but you know, the thing about graphics from 2004 is that they are, you know, at least a tree looks like a tree rather than graphics from like 1991, you know. But ultimately, the physics still feel very fresh, I think. I also don't think it's particularly disrespectful to other sims necessarily to say that, because I think it's about intent, and realistically I think a lot of the more modern rally games are rally sims have taken the sales figures of Richard Burns Rally and thought about how they want to produce something that's probably more simcade, if you will.
Yeah, I actually just got a Japanese release of Richard Burns Rally, and it's notable that on the Japanese release of the PlayStation 2 release, it has an arcade mode.
This is, of course, because that version came out in September 2005, actually. So it came out over a year after the EU and US releases. Was there a US release? I'm not sure. Yes, the US release might have been later as well. I'm not sure.
But it just makes me think that, you know, the clear signal that gives is that their priority was on realism first, and obviously adding an easier mode was an afterthought.
Yeah, and I think it was late in the development. There was a recent history posted up, wasn't there, by a Swedish website where they spoke to Eero Putalainen and some of the other guys involved in the development of the game, where they were essentially saying they got to this stage of development and went, oh no, this is too hard. for certainly people on a joypad, certainly for the average player. Obviously, a PS2 game going out in that era was expected to sell to the everyman and the casual player. But the reality was that Peter Lane and Terra will probably correct my pronunciation there, and Richard Burns himself, because I remember speaking to Era about this around the time, wanted it to be a very serious sim. Richard Burns had actually said he'd come in to test early builds, and he'd given a lot of feedback, and he wanted it to be as realistic as possible, along with the people doing the core development. Whether SCI, the publisher, wanted that or not, I think is unclear, and it's quite possible that they came along late in the day and added in the arcade version that was a little bit too late to make it in. Of course, nowadays that would just be patched in, like on Steam or whatever, right? It would just be a free download for everyone.
Yeah, it's actually interesting that they didn't add it on online and stuff like that. I'm sure it would have been a large download and stuff like that. But you had a lot of pretty large file download sites and things that were around back then that are all now just broken dead links that are giving you sort of spyware and stuff like that. But yeah, there definitely could have got it out there. I think if the publisher was still supportive, but at that point, I mean, they probably had already cut their losses and moved on.
It is interesting why it came out so late, why they added the arcade mode so late. I think it was in Auto Sim Sport interview that all they
great magazine.
All that SCI wanted to add was the 3D paste notes thing to make it easier, but I don't know if it really helps with the problem of handling, or if you have problems with handling or playing with the controller.
It's interesting. Not really. I don't really feel like the 3D paste notes add a great deal, unless you're playing the game with the sound down, really, because the sort of the multitasking your brain does, I find, with the audio paste notes is far better than having to distract your eye point from the next apex.
But I guess it's also personal or subjective.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But I feel the same actually. Yeah. But it's always difficult to process many things or several things at the same time, whether visual or
well, I think especially starting out when you're only just new to the game, there will be a lot of people, I feel, that like we've talked about this on this podcast with GPL in the past, where it's like you needed to persevere. You need to somewhat bash your head against a wall a bit with the game. And I remember with Richard Burns Rally, they had the rally school part, and that ended with the rally stage, and it said you had the rally school stage, and it said you had to do it within a certain time before you graduate from rally school. And it took me quite a long time. I mean, a few nights to actually get through that. I think, I was, you play it too safe, and then you're not making the time. You push too hard, and then you crash. And it was pretty hard to find the right level, I think.
It wasn't as brutal as the tutorial in Driver, which I remember was always the one that I think a load of people never even played the game, but. I think on that point of the paste notes and things like that, I think it's and going back to the idea that having 3D paste notes, I'm not sure it's going to do very much if you're trying to play this with a controller and just
definitely not.
I do think it's sort of one of these things as an actual kind of accessibility aid and stuff. I mean, obviously if you're deaf, for example, then you're going to need some sort of visual clue, but for most people, I'd say it's sending you on the wrong path. What you need to learn is to learn how to listen to the paste notes and kind of process them and prepare properly. And having a big arrow on the screen saying we're going left, well, okay, maybe that helps you in the kind of the short term, but ultimately you're not going to get any good at the game if you're relying on that. You're going to have to kind of learn to change how you approach it and how you kind of process the information and plan ahead. So yeah, it's like a lot of these driver aid things that they're a bit gimmicky, really, and actually, I think how much they really help a player is debatable.
Yeah, I mean, I often think that about like the driving line on circuit racing sims, where it tells you where to brake, and by the line changes colour to blue or whatever, and you think I don't think that really helps you learn. It helps you learn to follow the line. It doesn't learn. You don't learn your way around the track or learn how to maximise the braking of the car and understand it properly.
You don't learn why that's the line.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. Yeah.
It does help to some degree if you know what you're supposed to learn from it, but I think the problem is that the games don't really tell you what you should like learn from these things, like the braking points and when you start to accelerate and things like that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think if someone who's experienced with sim racing puts on a driving line, they'll get the right thing out of it. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm experienced with sim racing. I must admit, I've just never even turned it on to see. But there you go. But I mean, like, I never trusted driving lines from back in the like F1 GP days, because I wasn't. Sometimes I'd look at it and go, well, that isn't the right line to be taking around this corner. So this is all utter nonsense. But yeah, it's probably. I presume it's got better since 1992.
But I also haven't, tried or used them really in any sim. I think I don't know if GPL had them. Maybe not.
No, it did have.
That's the first sim for me that I really sort of had to learn. It was a big learning curve.
Yeah, Grand Prix Legends, as did all of the NASCAR sims up to 2003, had basically an AI line defined kind of braking area that you could see. So when you turned on the racing line in NASCAR 2003, for example, you could see that the area where the racing line went red was exactly the area where the track got darker, the same as it did in Grand Prix Legends, even though Grand Prix Legends didn't have an ideal line.
Okay.
Yeah, and Grand Prix Legends did stuff like that, where it's like, there are skid marks here, which means I should probably be braking.
Yeah.
Which the IndyCar sims did before that as well. It's pretty much a David Kamer trope, I guess.
One thing that on the sort of going to the sort of subject of difficulty and stuff, obviously RBR is pretty challenging, but one thing again that going back to it is really kind of reminded me of, and I this is definitely something I remember from literally the first time I ever drove it, is that actually it's incredibly easy to drive when you're not pushing. It's incredibly natural, and the thing is I think, some people, I think the idea of driving on loose surfaces and stuff, it's like, oh, it must be really hard. It's not. In reality, it's not like driving on ice. If you're really pushing, then yeah, you need the skills and stuff. But actually, it's an incredibly natural driving experience in that title, and a lot of the conditions, and we've talked about this before as well. The modelling of the surface is really important. The shape of the roads, the cambers. It lends itself really nicely to driving, and if you go onto kind of pretty much any stage in any car and drive it at say 5 temps, it's really easy. It's really, really easy. It's not gonna catch you out. It's when you start pushing, the challenge really comes.
Well, one of the things I'd say to counter that a little bit is one of the biggest troubles that they had, which is also analogous to Grand Prix Legends, is that there was no slow cars. It was all A8 class WRC cars in the initial game, and they are cars that can spit you into the wall, right? If I remember thinking how it's the first rally sim where I had to modulate my throttle pedal, right? Because in Colin McRae Rally, the throttle pedal was on or off, basically.
Yes.
But these cars had so much power that you could spin it. You could get yourself into a right old situation by applying too much throttle on the exit. When I think it was 2006, RBR Online was released by Paolo Gibaldo's gang, and that had a Group N class with lots. Essentially, taking those A8 cars and taking down the power and softening them up, I think. And just driving, because I was driving a Mitsubishi and went to the Group N Mitsubishi from the A8, and it was just so much easier all of a sudden because you weren't. There were two things. One, the power delivery wasn't quite so huge, and like a big, it's this huge amount of torque comes from the turbo. But also like the sheer amount of speed that you would accumulate in such a short amount of time, right? It's like, I remember finding it much easier, and some of the stages I was getting on with quite well were the shorter stages that had tighter corners, because you could manage that better once you started to get up to corners where you're going into them over 100 miles an hour. If you got it wrong, it would go wrong spectacularly, and like that's where similarly GPL could have done with like a Formula 3 class or something like that, so that you could get used to it. Like in real rallying, you don't just start in WRC, you start in WRC 2 or 3 and drive slower front wheel drive cars and get used to some of the stages on the tour, basically. So
yeah, that is true.
Sorry, Terry.
Yeah. Also, the Group N cars, I think they were rear wheel drives, right?
I think some of them might have been, yeah.
I think they were kind of modded content because the original cars were 4-wheel drives and also a bit different to drive. But yeah, I also had problems to control these original cars, the beasts, and so the stuff with RBR Online was a lot more enjoyable in the Group N cars.
Yeah, I think there's two slightly different sort of issues here, though. So the point I was making about is actually the kind of drivability, and I think it applies even with the default cars, the WRC cars. Obviously, in real life, you stick someone in one of them, they're probably going to have an accident fairly quickly if they're being silly. But like I was saying, though, is if you put anyone with a driving license in a WRC car and say, look, drive along this road at 30 mile an hour or something, they're not going to struggle. I think what you're saying is perhaps very much a reflection on actually the title as a game, as a package. It was really not very well thought through or well presented in terms of the content for the learning curve, and sort of I don't know at what point they put the rally school in, but it's a bloody good job it wasn't there, because they said, off you go into the first stage, 300 brake horsepower, no one's going to get very far.
Yeah, I do think with the general handling of the cars and the actual physics and everything like that, we've spoken before about how, in my opinion, you can actually get a reasonable experience out of, for example, the Codemasters titles and things like that. But it's like you have to train your brain first to accept it, and that as a first impression for someone who's looking for something that's actually realistic, that's actually a really negative experience to go through. But with Richard Burns Rally, you're driving a car. It feels like you're driving a car. So it feels like you're in this space, and it's a natural experience, and that's something that it's still so rare. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, going back to it, I was very much thinking to myself how natural it feels and how naturally you react to the way the car behaves. Like, actually, it's more the stages that cause me to crash than the car, in a way. Because it feels very natural.
I think it was really exceptional, I guess, at the time. It's 20 years ago. And how natural it felt. I don't think there's been any kind of force feedback mods or changes or anything, even with RSF. And I just remember thinking back when Simon talked about how natural it feels. Well, first of all, I don't have a driver's license, so I can't compare to that. But I remember that it was really, really nice feeling back then already compared to other sims, not just rally sims, but I think the force feedback stuff was kind of experimental and weird at the time. Some sims were kind of crap with the
Yeah,
first few
definitely,
times.
yeah.
Now that I've later we can
Well,
look back
the
and
only
see
other
how it
sim
was.
at the time that was modelling the steering column force directly from the suspension geometry, which is what RBR does, was Netcar Pro. At the time, there was R Factor 1 didn't do that until a later patch. After, because there was a mod, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was a mod, yeah.
Yeah, and it was being based off the suspension and
Yeah.
stuff, so it was messy.
And the Kamer games, the Papyrus games weren't doing that for a while. I don't think until iRacing, to be honest. But I think the other thing that this comes back to is that Eero had a grounding in mechanical engineering. He was a graduate in mechanical engineering, and this sort of combination of somebody who is a good programmer, whilst at the same time have a solid understanding of vehicle dynamics and physics, is a very rare thing in the world. As we know, there are only a handful of people through time that have been putting together sims at this level. And it really shows, I think, there's a very sort of, I don't know, almost mechanical feeling to the physics in a way. It just feels very solid in the way that especially the suspension behaves.
Yeah, I remember back kind of around that time it was released, that whenever some new title came out, there'd always be a bit of a kind of learning curve with kind of understanding how physics work effectively.
Yeah, true.
And I always remember you would sort of, often when I'd get a new title, be it like a demo or like it was released or whatever, you'd start kind of messing around. Like you would just pull over and say, oh, what happens if you try and do donuts? Or what happens if you kind of lock the brakes? What happens if, you're basically kind of stress testing it a bit, trying to sort of break it almost, or just trying to learn what are the quirks of this. And there would be titles that maybe were great until you got to the limit, and then it's like, right, okay, once you kind of pass that point, it can't really handle it and stuff. And I remember with Richard Burns Rowley being incredibly excited, but also just really prepared to be disappointed, because that's sort of my personality, and it was kind of what history had taught me, especially when it came to rally titles. And I do remember kind of it was literally about 5 seconds after setting off in it for the first time, it's like, oh. And it wasn't about like, oh, I've tested it, I've stressed it and stuff, just instantly. And I think the phrase you used, John's really kind of appropriate one of it. Feels mechanical. The minute you feel any weight transfer, the minute you feel anything in it, it kind of feels right. And I'm not saying it's perfect, obviously it's not, and I'm not saying it doesn't have its quirks and whatever else, but by and large it just feels incredibly solid and incredibly convincing. And in the many hours over the many years that I've put into it, I don't think it's never felt kind of broken. It's never felt like it's cheating or it's kind of caught itself out. I think some parts of it are better than others. I think the loose surface stuff is kind of better than the tarmac stuff in general. Yeah. But it certainly, if you take kind of the loose surface stuff, it just feels convincing.
One of the biggest problems with the tarmac was I used to think that it felt like the tire was a really high profile tire and it was bending a lot. I mean, this is just like using my real driving experience and applying that in the sim, what it felt like. But I remember speaking to Eero about this, and he was saying it was because of the way they did the surface physics. And this is, I think, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think this is something that no other rally sim does. But basically, it's not just this is a piece of track that is lower grip level. When you slide the tire, it's modelling a build-up of gravel or snow, depending, on the outside edge of the tire, which obviously then applies to the physics of the car and affects the way it's going to go around the corner. And I think that's one of the things that gives it such a great feeling. the problem on tarmac is that some of that code comes off, and so essentially what you're feeling is that the tarmac is actually like peeling up and building up on the side of the tyre, which does it so it doesn't quite slide as cleanly. And I think I mean when we come on to talking about RSF, actually it's I think the tarmac physics are actually quite improved, because I think the other problem with it is that the tarmac setup is stiffer, and there are problems with the well, there's no flexibility at all in the modelling of the bump rubbers, basically the packers. So as soon as when the car is then sitting on its packers, there's very little give in any kind of tyre or suspension.
So would that build up? Would that sort of explain, like for me personally, when I'm on the tarmac in Richard Burns Rally, it feels like I'm driving on grit. So it's not as solid a surface as it's like my brain wants it to be. And it just kind of feels like it's gritty, which I don't know whether that's realistic or not, but it never really feels like I fully expect it to feel. It's just like there's a layer of dust or grit is what it's always felt like.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, it might be something like that. Like I say, I always equated it to like a tyre wall flex or something like that. But it's kind of like I don't think it feels like the way Eero explained it particularly, because it's just kind of a bit of a anomaly of the physics engine, pretty much. Okay. Like he tried to make that not happen, but it never quite felt right on the tarmac.
It always felt to me just like there was a bit of a disconnect. It didn't feel. You kind of had grip, but it felt. And I think this is kind of what you're saying, John, about kind of like sidewall flex or something. It just feels like there's something between you and the road that's not the tyre as it should be. And don't get me wrong, it's not terrible. It just, by the kind of very high kind of standards of the loose surface stuff, just in contrast, it always felt a little bit not quite there. And hearing that explanation direct from the person who put together that tyre model, kind of, makes sense to hear that there is something going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing I remember thinking in the past that made it feel quite different is that there weren't really any other sims on tarmac, circuit racing sims, that were modelling these sorts of cars as well. So I was sort of having to think to myself about, what would this car feel like? Am I saying it doesn't feel right because it doesn't feel like a single seater or a GT car? Well, it's obviously not going to feel anything like that. Like it might be quite large, like I guess a touring car sort of size car, but it's not going to handle anything like a circuit racing car at all. It's much softer, but also
four-wheel drive.
And four-wheel drive, yeah exactly, with active center diffs as well, which I've only really begun to look at the setup of the active center diffs really, which is it's kind of extremely complicated, and then really not helped by the terrible GUI that Richard Burns Rally has. But yeah, I believe that there is now actually a external mod where you can do the setup externally in a sort of Windows app. But
I actually looked into it, and I don't think it works.
No? Okay.
I think it was updated last 21 or something. So
okay, right.
It could be just on my end something weird. I don't remember what the problem is. It was like a month and a half ago or something.
Yeah.
I looked into it briefly.
Yeah, but touching on the kind of the GUI and stuff. It's a brilliant title. Obviously, we're sat here talking about it, not reminiscing just about like when we used to play it, but talking about it still holding up today. But as an actual product, some parts of it are horrendous, and like the menus and things were just. They didn't even let you use a mouse, did they? Did they?
No, because it's essentially the PS2.
Yeah,
it's just a port, I guess.
I've been like, I'd never played it until recently in VR, and just always having to scrabble around for the bloody keyboard because you have to
Yeah.
use the arrows to go through the menu and stuff. It's a real pain in the ass, but yeah, its brilliance is in spite of some of its design shortcomings. But.
So I just wanted to circle back quick to your thoughts on the racing school itself. Obviously, I feel like it took you through the absolute fundamentals, and then obviously it capped it off with that with the rally school stage, which, in my opinion, really allowed you to perfectly use those things that it taught you in the kind of earlier kind of training scenarios. It allowed you to really put those together in a way that really allowed you to get the best out of the title. If you actually went through the rally school and you actually took that information in, I think it was spectacular. And I do feel like that's a bit lacking in a lot of modern titles.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I absolutely, completely agree, but I believe that the course, as it's given, is based around the MSA rally school. So if you do the...
Is it?
Or at
Okay.
least certainly at the time, I don't know what the rally school is in Wales, and if you want to apply for an MSA rally class national licence, you have to go and do that. I think it's like a 5-day course, I think, because you do classroom days as well, though that might not be quite so good in the game.
That makes masses of sense. Okay. Yeah, did not know that.
I don't think the stage is specifically the stage that they have on that rally school, but like basically all of the lessons and the progress, I think, was brought in directly from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's great. I feel like I'm still using that rally school in any rally title that I have tried since. You know, I instantly know what to do in each situation. It was a really spectacular thing to have. Yeah.
I mean, I didn't actually know that the degree to which it was based on the MSA training, but yeah, you know, these rally schools exist certainly in the UK. There's quite a few dotted around, quite a lot in Wales, in Forest and stuff. And this is the thing, a lot of people like wanting to get into rallying and stuff, they haven't done loose surface driving and stuff, and so they literally just sit you in a micro or whatever it is, and they'll say, right, we're just going to go, and you're just going to go round in circles on this wet muddy bit, and then we'll go and do this, then we'll go and do that. So it is very much kind of representative of real world learning. I think one thing as well that I think it does really well is that it gives you the building blocks, and it gives you the, you know, it's here's how you take a corner, here's how you do this, here's how you do that, and by being quite like speed sensitive, both in terms of not letting you go in too fast but also not letting you go too slow, it basically tells you, it helps build your confidence. It's like you can go around this corner at this speed, and I think what it actually shows you is no matter how challenging the game is proper, actually this isn't that hard. It isn't this incredibly difficult thing to basically drive the car from A to B in a reasonable time. And if it literally just set you off and said, right, finish this stage in this time, and that was the first thing it did, people would just be, you know, off into the trees and whatever else. You go through that process and it equips you with the knowledge. It teaches you about kind of weight transfer. It's like, here's how you want to take this series of turns. And some of it's quite explicit, I think, and then some of it's a bit more subtle. It's almost more inherent in the task that you're doing, and it's like you then get the muscle memory for it, and you get the feel and the understanding. But yeah, it is an incredibly effective tool, very well done. And it was quite telling, I think, that actually when I loaded it all back up, the first thing I did was went and did the rally school again, even though I didn't have to, because it's like, oh no, I want to,
Well, and I think it's really nice that the RSF in their overhaul mod have kept the rally school in there, because they're obviously bringing in a lot of new players to it all the time. There's obviously loads of players coming in that never played it in 2005, might not have been born in 2005, and so it's really nice that they had that they kept that in. Though I think at the time I remember people being upset about it, not necessarily people in the sim racing world, but I remember at work there were people I knew that had bought it. They were fans of Colin McRae Rally. They bought it for their PlayStation, and they were struggling to complete the rally school, but also felt a little bit affronted and angry that they had to be able to play the game. And I tried to explain, but I think this is a perennial problem with all types of video game, that if you have to have a tutorial section or a piece that teaches somebody how to play the game, most people don't want to do that. Everybody wants to buy their new shiny game and get right playing it straight away.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a tangent there. We were just talking in our kind of private Discord thing about the new Indiana Jones game. And I think it was a spectacular choice of them to give you the basic instructions for the game using a flashback to the Raiders movie, where you basically play through something that you've already watched and stuff like that. But you take in the instructions because it's been put out there in that way, and I definitely think you can do it wrong where you lock off parts of the game, behind a school and stuff like that. But I think in this situation, it ties back to what you were saying earlier, where this game doesn't have slower cars. No. If you went right past this school and went right into those cars, you are going to end up in the trees, and especially when
you probably are anyway.
Yeah, if you've come from Richard Burns Rally, especially the tracks are 3 times as wide.
Colin McRae Rally.
Yeah. But it's it just. I think if you're coming from another title like that, this is hard in so many different ways that you must be forced to go through this school. It just makes so much sense.
Yeah, I remember being so surprised by how thin the stages were.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so scary.
Yeah, that's actually a topic we should definitely touch on, is how we feel about these stages, because I personally think I have a soft spot for the original USA and the original Japan stages.
Japan, definitely. I find the USA stages are all really wide too.
Not
have a lot of holes in the ground
wide,
too.
But,
I definitely like the speed of the US tracks, but the Japanese tracks are certainly a favourite. But yeah, they're much thinner than I think I've seen in any rally title, kind of up until the recent kind of KT racing titles and stuff like that, where they were replicating real stages. But I really feel like they were certainly the first rally sim, Simon can correct me maybe, to have realistic thin roads like that.
Well, there was the Mobile One Rally Championship that had kind of real stages. It's a long time since I played that. I can't comment on whether they kind of scaled them up in terms of width, but I think they were reasonable. It was just it handled like absolute junk, so it didn't really matter.
I think I tried it too, and I don't remember specifically either, but I think they were more sort of realistic sized or width, but
They were very forgiving in terms of you might have the right width of road, but if you go off to one side, you're not crashing your car because you're hitting a rock or a tree. You're kind of just bouncing around some low poly terrain. And I do think the stages are so important in Richard Burns Rally in terms of basically making it the experience it is. The car, you can't drive the cars in the way you drive them unless you have realistic roads to drive on. You need the right shapes and cambers and contours and stuff. That's a part of why you drive them the way you do. It's also really important for the experience in that if you just have these massive wide kind of 6-lane motorway stages like you get in Colin McRae, well, half your challenge is gone. Suddenly the speed's much higher, so the driving experience is going to be completely different. It needs to be those kind of realistic stages for the cars, otherwise you're never going to have the realistic driving experience itself. I think they're kind of it's really easy to overlook them, but they're a massive part of why that title sort of landed the way it did.
I think if you look at Colin McRae's Rally and prior also Sega Rally, which was extremely popular in the arcades in particular. You don't do very much braking in those games, and from an arcade perspective, that's remember like Daytona at the arcade as well. Which, and to be fair, you don't do much braking at Daytona anyway. But the this desire for, like, one of the great things I remember from the arcade of Sega Rally is how high the frame rate was and how everything would be whizzing past. The sensation of speed in that game was fantastic. And I remember playing that with friends of mine down the bowling alley that were not people that did video games. They were people that drove cars, and they absolutely loved it. But yeah, I used to say to them, like, you have to touch the brake like twice in one 5-minute stage. Whereas it, like, then suddenly we come along and Richard Burns Rally is released, and you've got to be braking quite a lot. Somebody's going to announce a left 3, and you're doing Mach 9, and before you know it, you're into all the trees or down a cliff or whatever. So I think a lot of casual players really struggled with that because they'd been so used to these other arcadey games prior to it.
I actually think. Sorry, that's part of what I think Simon kind of touched on earlier. Is that the rally school taught you pacing. It's not necessarily about going as fast as you can. It's about making it to the next turn and the next turn and the next turn. I think that's when the rally school again, like, specifically laid out these scenarios and basically, like, this is how you do this, this is how you do this. It really got you from one turn to the next. And I think all of those older titles that you're talking about, John, it's just, hold the maximum speed you can. If it's too fast, you can bounce off the wall. It's okay. And definitely with Richard Burns Rally, there was no chance for that at all.
It's not just the older titles, though. It's all the other titles pretty much that have come since as well. And I think the way that they teach you to play is basically, if you've gone in too fast, you just pitch the car in, you scrub some speed off, and the worst is that you kind of go a little bit wide.
Go wide, yeah.
And the thing is that it's in Formula One this year, for example, there's been so much talk about track limits and stuff, and what always gets said every time it comes up is, well, you don't worry about track limits at Monaco. And the thing with rallying is kind of like every corner and every stage is sort of like you're at Monaco. You go wide, and you're gonna, yes, you can slide off and get back onto the road, and you might just hit a bush or something. And rally cars are obviously a lot more resilient than F1 cars and a lot of circuit cars when it comes to taking knocks. But ultimately, the jeopardy there is always generally pretty high for if you go off, and that's so important to how you approach these things. If you just say, I'm just going to keep going until I kind of manage to make it and smashing my way around, you're just never going to get anywhere. You need to just slow down. You need to concentrate on actually staying on the road, and then you need to build your speed up, not start as fast as you can and keep knocking it down until you can get through.
Yeah, and that's actually part of the sim racer problem, I feel like, is that a huge amount of sim racers will try to come down to the speed that they should be going rather than building up to it. And what you've just done is essentially define what the safety rating should be doing in iRacing, which is teaching you that if you keep at the steady pace, you can gradually build up your speed, but people just don't do that. And yeah, that's probably another reason why Richard Burns Rally was so hard for everyone to first of all get into. But what you guys just touched on there a little bit was the damage too. How did you guys feel about the damage? And obviously, John, you probably know fairly well the internal components that were modelled, as far as I've read, were modelled pretty realistically. So when something broke, it broke.
Yeah, and you could do a slight bend to a suspension arm or a steering arm and still maybe keep going with bent steering. And I remember times when the the door was flapping open. I remember the
Oh yeah, true.
because the audio in it is very good. You'd get a louder as the door flapped open. It's you hear the outside much more suddenly. Your engine's a little bit louder. But yeah, I mean, possibly to my own detriment in terms of like learning, I always went with realistic on there's like realistic and reduced and none as options. I think on the damage, I always went with realistic, and it can be very sensitive. Like sometimes you're like, oh, I only hit that tree quite gently. I only hit it quite gently, didn't I? And now the bloody thing's broken because you've smashed your radiator to pieces, right? And if the radiator goes, you're like instantly overheating. It's I think it's really well done, like you say, because sometimes you can Colin McRae your way out and hammer it straight. And the only thing that's missing actually is the ability to get out of your car and hit a damper with a spanner until it's straight again, or something like that. But get out of your car and repair a puncture, which is stuff that rally drivers do all the time, right? It's there's no sim that's ever quite gone that far with the realism, I suppose.
It really does add to the experience, especially if just having been on high realism, i.e. relatively unforgiving if not realistic in terms of damage, means that if you're just time trialing or practicing doing a stage, it basically means look, you go off big, that's it, you're screwed. But if you're actually doing a rally, and obviously with the kind of developments that have happened in the community and the online scene there, that's a big part of that. You then have if I'm sort of if I'm 7 stages in and I've really invested in this and I'm doing well or whatever, and now I've smacked a wheel or I've bent this or I've broken that, and I've got to kind of keep going and try and keep the pace up but not damage it more, and then I've got to think about the service and what's going to what time I've got and everything else. It's it's obviously a big part of the real sport, and it's a big part of the game effectively. It's really important, I think, that's there, much more so arguably in some cases than sort of with circuit racing typically, certainly in some formulas anyway, where it's basically it's broken, that's it, and or you're good. It's not a binary thing at all. It's about kind of survival and sometimes just getting to the end no matter how many bits of your car aren't there anymore.
And that sort of brings us a bit to the online component, which was obviously a mod through RBR Online, and more recently, if we get to it, RSF Rally Sim Fans.hu's complete overhaul mod has added an online component where you can join online rallies, full online events and championships that various users put together. One of the things you mentioned there, Simon, about sim racing is that you get this situation where people will they damage their car, and you might still be able to get the car to the end, but they just give up, and why bother? I think an online rally, especially if you're participating in a championship where there's points being scored, you've got much more onus to try to stay in the game, right?
Yeah, and it's very much like reality in that respect. There's a lot to kind of play for still, and you never know what's going to happen to anyone else. By the very nature of not being on track with everyone else and seeing where they are, in a circuit, again, there's kind of a lot more. It's you against the clock and the conditions, and I just think it's going back to some of the other titles that aren't as good. They've often, I think nearly every rally game I've ever played has that same thing of you accumulate some damage, you get a service area, you've got some time, what do you fix and stuff. And it doesn't need to be anything particularly sophisticated in that sense. It sort of by its very nature just kind of works in a way. I've not entered the online rallies, I have to admit. It's something quite keen to try out. I need to do the rally school a few more times first, I think, get myself back up to it.
I haven't either. I've done some what's it called, the hot lap ranking, where I've actually committed some of my stage times online, and haven't necessarily disgraced myself too much with the online stuff. I did do. Me and Tero actually met in 2006 through RBR Online, through often finishing stages approximate to one another.
Yeah, good times.
Yeah, back in the day, but when we were young. But the yeah, I haven't built up the gumption yet. But one of the other good features, I think, one of the other great features of RSF is that they've got a offline championship option that doesn't necessarily tie you to the cars from the original game. So one of the big components they've added is the NGP. Tara, do you remember what NGP stands for? Next Generation Physics. Next Generation Physics. So it's NGP version 7, which revises the physics. Now, I must admit I had some hesitation about this because, as we've all been discussing, obviously the physics in RBR were absolutely perfect and didn't need anything doing. But I think actually it feels really good. One of the main things, as I touched upon before, is that they added flexibility into the packers. Meaning that the cars don't necessarily feel as skatey when they hit the bottom of the suspension travel, which never used to be as much of a problem on gravel and snow as it did on tarmac, but could be noticeable on those surfaces. I think if you when you really got into the grit of things, and it gives I think it makes the cars more drivable in general, but as well as that. There's 1 billion new cars. I mean, how many cars is there? Approximately 1 billion. No, 99. 99 cars
really?
In
that
total.
Many?
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, graphically they're of varying quality, but because they're all using the same physics base, they are pretty solid, provided there's decent data, I think. You can see the user population using different cars. For instance, the Skoda Fabia RS Rally 2 car. 29,500 people started a stage in that last month, which is outstanding numbers, basically, for any sim at the moment. I think probably only iRacing pulls that kind of numbers per month. But I mean, like, you can look at things like that and probably infer that Skoda Fabia Rally 2 is probably a good car. So there are certainly some gems in there, and there are certainly some that aren't so nice. But yeah, the offline rally championship options give you, at the moment, it's only WRC 2.0, most modern, and also Group B, which everybody loves or loves to hate, to allow you to run a championship essentially from the 1980s.
I was just gonna touch on the popularity aspect of the Skoda. I've been thinking that there's noticing that there's definitely areas in the world where these RBR and RSF are more popular, like Czechs like it, and Hungarians.
There's a lot of Czech players, isn't
of
it?
course, but I guess that's also where rallying is very popular or loved. So that could affect the aspect of the popularity of the Skoda, which is is it the Czech car?
Yeah, Czechia, yeah.
Yeah, so there's that combination. So
I mean, it's technically a VW, so it's German, but
German car, okay.
The
is it Italian because they also own Lamborghini now. So
yeah. In third place in the car list is the Subaru Impreza GC8 Group A car, the L555 BAT, which I've driven quite a bit and really enjoyed, but also found very hard because it's very fast and not as refined. I think one of the things you notice when you drive the more modern cars, especially very modern Rally 2 and Rally 1 cars, is how their suspension is so incredibly capable. And it was so capable that I was like, hang on, this Rally 1 car, this is not realistic. And then I watched some modern rallying on board shots and was like, oh no, it is. This is just how good rally cars are now. They are way better than they were in this Impreza is from 1994, I think. 94. Colin McRae won the championship in 94 and won it in 95, but the GC8 ran in both years. Yeah. So like it's not stunningly capable in terms of its road holding, but it is very much powerful when it comes to its power delivery.
Just a little bit of a tangent, but do you think this is another situation where, as well as being everything that we've said about this title, that it also came along at the perfect time? Because if I think about certain simulations and stuff, it's they were based on like the perfect year of F1, or there were things like that. Do you think one of the biggest selling points for Richard Burns Rally for us still today is the fact that it is that era of rally car?
I think for the base game, I think that was the best era of rallying for sure.
Yes,
sort of 95 through to 2005, and those cars, the A8 class cars. I mean, I'll know more about whether that's the right category or not. But that was peak rallying as far as I was concerned.
I think it's a very personal thing, and people of different ages obviously resonate with different eras.
Yeah.
I do think in the world of rallying, the WRC car era is not one of those that's particularly seen as like golden era. You had
probably
Group
not.
Group B, obviously everyone kind of eulogizes about. When Group A first came in, everyone hated it because it was so slow compared to Group B, but then that quickly built up. And then when it went to the WRC cars, I don't think it's a kind of golden era necessarily in most people's eyes that's captured by RBR. In terms of the machinery or the drivers, really. I mean, Richard Burns himself is not one of the most popular drivers out there. He's quite an odd choice in a sense. I mean, it's based on what I've heard and read about his involvement, it was a very good choice for the game being what it was. But he wasn't the kind of. Colin McRae's fame obviously was boosted a lot by the games, as well as he was well known and a kind of commercial choice for.
And his driving style.
Yeah, exactly. He was very kind of Hollywood, and Burns was kind of very much almost
the opposite,
nutritionist in a sense. Like,
quiet man. Yeah.
I guess it's kind of sad to bring up, but I guess Richard Burns' death also played a role in sort of making him a bit more, known and loved. And as we kind of refer to Senna, or talk about Senna the show the other day, and it's kind of the same that when someone dies at the peak of their career, or just at kind of the wrong time, then it sort of elevates things around them and extends sort of their not reputation, but
in a way, Richard Burns is survived by this game. Like there will be people playing the game, going, "Well, I've never heard of this guy." Just like when I played Jack Nicklaus golf for the first time in 1990, I had no idea that Jack Nicklaus was even a real person. But there will be people playing. Yeah, right. There will be people, younger people playing Richard Burns Rally now, and if they like the sim enough, they will presumably go out and find out more about this guy. Right?
Yeah, I'm frankly not sure whether it was sales numbers or his death, but the original announcement of his involvement and the title and everything like that mentioned a series of games to compete with the Colin McRae series as a more realistic side of simulations. So yeah, there was at least at one point a plan to make this a series.
Yeah, there was supposedly going to be another one, but then not after the release. There then wasn't. And as you say, Richard himself, I think, died in 2005, right? So it's not long after. In fact, I remember it happening, and talking with the RBR Online guys, at the time, and everyone was very upset. We had a online memorial rally that I took part in. I don't know if you did, Tero.
I think so.
Yeah.
I can't really remember specifically, but it would make sense, and considering that I was active there.
But it's an interesting point you raised, Simon, because there was no Juha Kankkunen rally. There was no Marcus Grönholm rally, like guys that were more successful in rallying even than Colin McRae was. As you say, Colin McRae's popularity seemed to go above the sport in a way.
Yes.
He was incredibly flamboyant as a driver. In that sense, he was kind of like Vatanen. Like he was very popular within the sport and kind of amazed people outside the sport. You might not be that into it, but you see him drive, and it's in a way that maybe if you watch Car Science, you weren't quite as infused because it wasn't as dramatic and stuff.
It's a personality thing, of course, always. Some personalities just extend sort of beyond their, chosen field.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's also one of the last, not the last, because there was a Sebastian Loeb Evo rally, but it's one of the last of this, because it was quite a big popular thing through the 90s where a racing game would be named after some racing driver or another. There was a Nigel Mansell game, there was a Johnny Herbert game, Ayrton Senna's Monaco Grand Prix and all this. That just seemed to completely go away not long after Richard Burns' rally, really.
Yeah.
As I say, there's a Sebastian Loeb game, but I don't think there's been any off the top of my head since.
Yeah, the even Codemasters dropped Colin McRae with Dirt 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really was a thing. I have shelves of old games behind me that are all named after someone, or even there was even team names like the Newman Haas game and stuff like that. So it was a really popular thing, and it is a little bit strange that that's kind of gone away, but really when you think about the sport right now, how many of those kind of stars are there that like for me it may be just the age I was at the time and things like that, but I don't weirdly even think of a lot of the F1 drivers as the kind of star as Colin McRae.
Well, I mean, I think Lewis Hamilton certainly transcends the sport in that sense. Like lots of people, lots of people generally who aren't into motorsport know who Lewis Hamilton is. And I'm pretty sure if you threw Max Verstappen's name onto a racing game, you would get a lot of sales. But rallying on the whole doesn't. I don't know if this is just me because I was into this sort of thing and watching it on the telly and stuff in the 90s. But it seems to me that rallying is less popular now than it was then. I think probably because it's on pay-per-view and no one can watch it.
That's true. I think it was also a marketing thing. Gaming was less common 20 years ago, and I think they used like known names to promote games and get more people into gaming. And so these days also there's so many things you can sort of enjoy and watch, and nobody really is kind of as popular, I guess, in general overall as maybe 20 years ago. At least it feels like so. And then there's also the pay-per-view stuff that you can't really watch things as freely or easily in a way as before. At least over here, they broadcasted F1 and rally on like our BBC type channel network. And you didn't have to pay anything. Oh, I mean, it was like tax funded, of course, but there's no barrier in a sense to not watch it, to stop watching it.
I mean, I feel like Sebastian Ogier is a 9 times champion, and I think you wouldn't really get much benefit from adding his name to a game nowadays.
I don't think I would even know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
Well,
that.
Precisely. I mean, Thierry Neuville was crowned champion a couple of weeks ago. Did any of you guys know that?
Nope.
Simon,
I think I saw it somewhere. I saw something somewhere, but I wouldn't have known. No.
The point about kind of these sort of licensing and stuff is one thing, and that's obviously kind of a change that's happened not just related to motorsport games. It kind of seems to be a bit of a trend across the board. But one thing that has kind of continued past that this title is the kind of collaboration with real drivers, and it's one of these things where it's never once excited me to hear this or that driver is involved in something, because I've seen the number of games that have come out the other side of this supposed expert input. You know, like, we got this real racing driver, we got this person, we got that person. And I think, again, based on kind of some reading and a few anecdotes and stuff, I think Richard Burns Rally definitely holds up as probably the best example of what can come about from having that kind of collaboration, because I think he really did play kind of an important role in this. He wasn't just a name on the box. He was kind of, to all intents and purposes, sounds like very much a part of the driving force behind making it the title it was. And I think that it's something that's it's a real shame actually that it doesn't work like that more often. The number of high profile or talented people who you see be involved in something, and you look at what comes out the other end and just think, well, what was your input on this? What were you contributing to this? Because this has got nothing to do with reality.
Just remind me, I read something, I don't remember what interview, but there was some guy who was doing a lot of testing for Richard Burns Rally that was recommended by Richard Burns himself, if I recall correctly.
Possum Bourne was involved.
Yeah. So not to take credit away from him, and
I think it was that was in the history, wasn't it? It was the there was a guy from the rally school that
Possum
Richard Burns
Bourne was
knew.
like an Australian guy.
Yeah. No, this guy was a British guy, but yeah, we'd have to look it up. I'll put it in we'll put it in the show notes, Tim, if we ever have show notes. Okay, so going back to RSF, Tero, you've been playing it a fair bit, right? And Simon, you've
not
been playing
lately,
it
but yeah.
I think we've had a lot of discussion about the different cars, and not like about the cars specifically, what the cars are, but about the very different sort of techniques you have to use with rear-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, four-wheel drive. Like Richard Burns Rally original game was all four-wheel drive cars. Full stop.
MG, wasn't there?
Front-wheel drive car, was
A
it?
little 1600 MG ZR, but I
Was
can't
it?
remember.
Actually,
if that,
there was something. Yeah.
I can't remember if that was in the original. I think I've got a feeling that was almost like a bonus car, even though
There was something. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sure now that you mention it. Yeah.
A slow bonus car.
Yeah.
Very strange.
That's the opposite of bonus. I don't know.
I think
Anyway.
one of the really interesting things for me, especially as it's generally my preference, is a rear-wheel drive car, and how very differently you have to approach rally stages, and how it's quite different in the way that you will yaw the car into a corner and things like that, because you're not able to use the traction from the front wheels to pull it out of a corner. What's some of your favourite cars that you've played with, Tero?
Actually, I haven't tested that many cars. I've been driving the Ford Escort Cosworth Mark V a lot. I actually started with a rear-wheel drive car because I felt it would be easier and more sort of normal for me, but I couldn't really get the hang of it, and I don't know exactly why. It may be at least partly because I have these like tiny RC cars that are four-wheel drive, sort of rally drift cars that I've been throwing around in my house every now and then, and I guess maybe something in how I drive it is in my in my spine, and it makes it somewhat easier to drive a four-wheel drive car in RBR now. I don't know, but I really like it, and it feels like it's more natural driving style for me now. I should drive something else now that I've got quite a lot of miles in the Escort.
That uses a sequential shift, of course, and the other thing, one of the other things their overhaul
Which it
has
shouldn't,
added is,
technically.
well, as
we
discussed, there was the original Mark V Escort had a H gate.
It's supposed to be a
gearbox,
Group
but
A car, but
what was it? It
Group
was
8 do not have H pattern. Only
It's-
the WRC that came after it was
Right.
modified, so it's like the wrong model visually. And I think that's why it is sequential.
we managed to track.
I mean,
from
of course
a,
you can drive. Of course you can drive it H pattern. It's not a problem. I don't think the game makes any difference. In that way.
Absolute outrage, Terry. You got to drive the correct gearbox for the car.
I
Right?
should.
Yeah.
I actually did change around my shifter handbrake stuff. That it's easier now to drive with H pattern. So I'm gonna do that.
What we tracked down, actually, Simon, you'll love this, is that from the fourth event, which might have been Corsica, I'm not sure. Fourth event of 1997, the Ford was fitted with a sequential shift, so it was an HK for part of 1997, and then part way through the year they introduced the sequential on the handle, not on no paddles. And then it was gone in the next rally, and because it wasn't reliable, and then it came back again, and then it was gone again, and then it stayed for the rest of the season. So
I don't
obviously,
think any rally cars have paddles, right? I
well,
think it's
well,
always
nowadays they do.
Oh yeah, that's true. Nowadays, yeah.
But
Which is wrong.
It's not so much paddles. I think it's usually a ring around, or maybe they're very large paddles, so that when you because you're putting in so much steering lock all the time, you need to
I
be
don't
able
think
to
it
find it.
rotates.
Often
It's just
it's
like
one that you push and
one
pull, I
paddle.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I've
right,
seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've only driven one car since getting this, and it's the Mark II Escort, and
Rear wheel drive then.
rear-wheel drive, and
I drove it too briefly. Yeah.
Yeah, because I actually went out. I took my son out to watch his first ever rally a couple of weeks ago.
Nice.
And it's funny because that's what I used to do when I was his age and stuff. But like a lot of the talk we've been having about cars and stuff. So on this event there was some.
Is this BRC or BRC finale?
No, it was just at Croft Circuit. It's a little event they have there called the
Okay.
Christmas Stages.
Nice.
And there was some kind of WRC stroke S2000 stroke R5, these modern foil drive things. And some of the guys driving them could really drive them. Some of them, not so much, but you can kind of point and squirt and still go pretty quick in those things without necessarily being that committed. And then there were a load of Mark II Escorts, and I'm proud to say that my son came away and said his favourite car was the Mark II Escort. So I was like, right,
well, maybe your enthusiasm was rubbing off. Yeah.
But yeah, so because I think one thing that's really kind of, I know this happened a little bit with Grand Prix Legends, but like that's obviously been superseded. But for Richard Burns Rally to be kind of not just the best, but arguably the only good rally sim, it's so annoying in a sense that its original content was so limited. The fact that it didn't have more in there that would let you take advantage of how good it is and stuff. So like having these kind of having this mod content, there's no rear wheel drive car in Richard Burns Rally. Like what a kind of crying shame, really.
Or front wheel drive, unless you've won and you get this magic car. Yeah.
I'm sure there's an MG in it.
There is an MG.
I think
but
you're
I don't
probably right.
remember- I don't remember if it's like a rear wheel or front wheel drive.
It would have been front wheel drive. Yeah. It's the Rover MG, wasn't it? It's the Rover 200. ZR. Yeah.
I actually have kind of the opposite opinion to Simon there, and it might be because he's more of a rally fan and stuff. But I really like when sims have a bit of limited content so that you can get in depth with those cars. And for me, that was what was actually great about Grand Prix Legends, was the kind of limited car roster. And it's what I really hate about the modern, especially arcade racers, where it's we have a 500 car roster. Yeah, but how many of them are like vans?
Yeah,
you
can really get to know the vehicle as well, like that way. In because I've actually had, since I've been messing around with RSF, unlike these two guys, I just kept changing car all the time. I was like, I'll try this and I'll try this, and I was never really getting comfortable in any of them.
Right.
To the point that I annoyed myself. Like I was like, oh, for crying out loud, like stop choosing a different car. But like part of me wanted to try different categories and everything like that. I mean, it makes sense. Like, I feel like if one of the things they could develop nicely is the offline championship stuff, where and they're going to add more class categories so that you can focus on doing potentially a season or a single rally, I don't know, in a Citroen C3 or whatever, and then move on to something different. I'm going to do Group B and whatever.
Yeah, that would be my ideal usage of a large roster. Would be that you start off in a particular category, and it's like, then as part of your career, you then move on to the next one and move on to the next one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think your point, Tim, about the limited content in the original, I completely understand what you mean. I guess I'm thinking of it more not as the title in itself as like what you bought off the shelf and kind of got home and installed and played. I'm thinking the fact that that's all we've had for the last 20 years to kind of...
Yes, that is very true. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think I don't think the original game should have come with 99 cars, but I also would argue it didn't need 8 WRC cars. It could have come with like a 1600, well, like a 1300 front wheel drive, a 1600, a 2 litre, a rear wheel drive, a WRC car. It could easily have 8 cars with a lot more variety
and a career mode behind it as well.
And the other thing is that, like I say, when I went to watch this rally recently, and just a small local thing, but that had an entry. There was about 90 cars in that, and you have a lot more than 8 different types of car in it. It's a real mix. And going back to what you're saying, John, I think having that kind of big field and different cars in an actual rally, and you say, right, well, this is what I'm driving, and you go, and you're in a class, and you're against people in different things, and some of those cars will be much quicker on the straights, but less good around the corners, and it'll all ebb and flow, and the driver can make more of a difference and stuff. You're not just watching someone pull away on the straights and you can't get past like it can be in a circuit if you're in mixed class and stuff. I think it really lends itself to that, and variety is the spice of life. But I say that, I just drive one car out of the 99 available or whatever.
No, I mean, I think my favourite coming through has been the Fiat 131 Abarth, which is, I think, not dissimilar to the Escort, actually.
Group 4,
and it's rear-wheel drive. It's got very nice... clean front end. I find like you can get it into corners very nicely, and I also like one of the again is something me and Sarah talked about is handbrake technique. With rear-wheel drive cars, obviously you need to declutch with the handbrake. And it's like the hardest thing in the world, basically, because you get so used to you're arriving at this hairpin. You're on the brakes usually pretty hard because you were doing 1 billion miles an hour a minute ago, and you're coming down through the H-gate gearbox as well. Not necessarily coming down. Actually, one of the points I wanted to make about the H-gate, which is also new to Richard Burns Rally in a way, is that it's actually quite nice to be able to brake. And something I never do really in circuit racing is brake, 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 and then just select the gear that you want, and instead of come down through the gears. I've really found myself doing that a lot more with the rallies. Like, I've got it slowed down, and now I'm just going to throw it into third and pull out of this corner. But the arriving on a hairpin, you're on the brakes, possibly with your left foot or your right foot, depending on how you're going. You want to get down through the gears with your right hand. You have to then get on the clutch and reach for the handbrake, pull that up, not for too long and not for too little, and get the back end moving, and then remember to get back to the gear stick to select first gear if you hadn't already, but you probably didn't want to blow up your engine prior. So then it just all ends up going wrong for me quite often. So one of the things I found nice to learn, watching some footage of, I think it was Mickey Biasion in the in this car, was that he wasn't using the handbrake most of the time in the hairpins because it's got quite a lot of steering lock and it's got quite a good front end on it, so you could actually just slow it down, get it into the corner, and then you obviously use the rear wheel drive to yaw the back end round the corner. So it's a completely different technique to what you would do with four wheel drive, because with four wheel drive and front wheel drive, once you start applying the throttle out of a hairpin, you're getting torque steer, and that's your main concern. Whereas you don't get that at all with the rear wheel drive.
I mean, it really needs another rally school, and it needs
for each different type of car.
Good point.
Yeah, because I had some really good time in the Peugeot 106 Rally on tarmac the other day, which was the first time I'd driven a front-wheel drive car in it. And I mean, it was tremendous fun as well, because it's not the fastest car, but it is a really well-balanced car and it handles really nicely. And it was the first car I'd really got on with well on the tarmac. I was finding when I'd been driving the Fiat, basically I needed to do some setup work because it was snapping too much into oversteer. Whereas once I got into the groove with the Peugeot 106, it was actually tremendous fun. And yet, I say it's one of the slower cars, but there's a stage from the France section of Richard Byrne Rally called Côte d'Arbres, which I was using as my test space. It's only 5k, so it's quite quick to do, about 3 minutes. There's a section where you go over the top of the mountain and you're like almost flat out all the time. You're just doing these little lifts to get the lift off oversteer, to tuck the nose of the car in fifth gear. I don't know what speed I'm doing because I haven't got time to look down, but like it is so intense, and like there's a cliff on one side and rocks on the other side, and you're just slotting through. Absolutely fantastic, basically. And that's one of those slow cars, right? Sorry, Terry.
No, I was talking over you. It was. I remember the stage is one of my favorites. I haven't revisited at all now that I've started back RBR. So I've actually done mostly those new modded or added tracks.
Well, that's a good segue.
I tried the rally stage once or twice, but yeah.
It's a good segue. What do we think of the new stages? They vary a little bit, but
vary a lot. I mean, a lot, because some of them are like, I don't know, 15 years old at least.
Yeah.
And they've been trying to sort of make them, well, not really update them, but sort of make them work better because of the different tools that have existed over the years. At least that's my understanding. And the Bob's Track Builder ones are kind of shitty performing, and maybe it's also really sort of noticeable in the geometry of the track, the amount of polygons and things like that.
Well, what I found, when I've tried new mod tracks, I've quite often gone for real life, where they've done depictions of real life stages.
Same for me, yeah.
And they do vary immensely. Some of the finished stages, though, I think are really good. I haven't tried them all, but I haven't really paid too much attention to how old they were, I must say, actually, because sometimes you go in and you're a few corners in and you're just like, hang on a minute, this isn't working out. But and some of the real life stages are incredibly hard, actually, as well. So sometimes I'm like, I'm not ready for this, or I need to get back into my 106, and learn the stage a bit better before I go in. But yeah, I found some very nice finished stages that are not wide but very fast, and there's a lot of trees whizzing by very fast. Which again, the VR, which is another aspect that's obviously been added. Previously, it was a mod for RBR anyway, the RBR VR, wasn't it? But it's sort of all integrated into this all-in-one overhaul. So it's all
it's also a mix of different add-ons that work independently if you want to use them. At least some of them are. I'm not sure. It's kind of a messy combination of different things that the RSC guys, I don't know, have put together and uphold them. But a lot of good stuff, but really messy in a way.
I mean, I love the fact that there's people out there who
Oh yeah.
the time and energy that's obviously gone into this, and they've kept it alive. It would have been so easy for this to just disappear, basically, and it's great it's not. But that said, like, my God, has it brought back some painful memories of like. It's such a reminder of why some people hate PC gaming. Just
yeah, definitely.
I mean, I've just had this horrible combination of like hardware issues and software issues, and I mean, I tried to play a bit the night before last, and suddenly it just said, "Oh, you don't have the VR bits installed. You need to install them." And it's like, well, I do have them installed because I've just been bloody using them, and then I had to run the whole installer again, which took about an hour going through things, and like, yeah, it's sort of like I say, a bit painful, but
welcome to PC gaming, as you say, but
I mean, on the tracks point, I've really not explored much at all. I mean, I must admit, one thing I do struggle going back to Richard Burns Rally is the whole menu system and stuff, and like, you know, just it's clunky as hell, really. It really is. So I've kind of just tended to pick like a couple of I pick some of the original stages, and I've just kind of been sticking with them while I get back into it, really. But I don't know exactly how much curation has gone on in terms of, you know, the quality. Is this throw everything in the kitchen sink, or is it like being carefully selected and chosen to be what's in there? I'm not sure.
I think they're vetted to a certain
question.
extent. I think they're vetted to a certain extent, but mostly just to clarify that they work, you know, rather than that they look great or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think they try to fix things that some tracks have, and maybe remove some tracks from the listing that aren't working, or they can't get fixed to a certain degree. But I think maybe they should have a bit less and hopefully better, you know, quality tracks than they do now. That's just a personal thing.
When you guys are talking about quality, are you talking about mainly visual stuff, or are you talking about like the actual design of the stages?
Well,
a bit of both, I guess.
A bit of both. Sometimes the point cloud and the stage can be strangely bumpy and things like that. The cars leaping in the air or things like that. So, but I mean, I haven't seen that very much. It is mostly just the graphics and sometimes the frame rate that you're getting from it.
Yeah, it depends what tool they use to create the track, and I don't know what. Obviously, I don't really know what they do with the tracks or what the issues are, but some are just a lot heavier to run on your system. And I think they have a weird solution, or not weird solution, but specific solution for POP's track builder tracks that you can force them to run different settings in VR, especially. I think. But going back to the geometry and the quality stuff, I remember there's a stage that I tried that was really a lot of elevations and corners, but it had really few polygons and it felt really crappy. Weird.
Yeah, I've had a few of those as well. Yeah.
I mean, I've not, as I say, I've not explored them myself, but I mean, I don't think it's ever going to look amazing.
No. Well, it depends kind of what you define. There's a certain kind of aesthetic, I think, that comes with these I don't know, early 2000 games that don't really have a real-time lighting system, or it wasn't possible in the graphics engine.
The lighting is usually the problem. I think the standard is set by the original stages, though, from Warthog, right?
In a way, there's this I can't remember the name of it, that was released not too long ago, and that looks really amazing to me, at least. But it kind of does have it does look realistic, but it's kind of a weird sort of specific graphic style or visual style of feeling to it that I think they maybe should try to, you know, play towards.
Yeah, when we're talking about the original graphics, I mean, John said earlier that, you know, it's limited, and we all know it's limited to the period that it was made and things like that. But I do really appreciate the fact that you can run a title that actually drives this well, and you can run it at like 4K, and it's just like your CPU is like barely active. Your
Yeah.
GPU is like, oh, this is fine. You know, it's just it's really amazing actually that it's like that. I think that's why iRacing currently still scales so well and stuff like that, is because of obviously, you know, the engine that it came from. And as they kind of try to make things a lot more complicated, obviously the system specifications start going up and up and up. But that's the really great thing about this title too, is that you know, if you think about the areas that you guys were saying that Rally is really popular and stuff like that, I know that, you know, computer parts aren't cheap and, you know, things like that, but it's great that people can still race something that's this great on an old system, and, you know, can still have this much fun. It's great.
And you can still argue it's the, like stated already, that it's the best rally sim there is.
Yeah. And of course, so this version, this overhaul mod, is free, of course. So you're not paying for the software, and, you know, it doesn't need much hardware. And it probably explains why it has so much popularity in parts of the world where people don't necessarily have so much cash too.
That's a good point, because a lot of the mods and stuff that exist for other sims do have some sort of have to pay some way for some amounts, but there's nothing here that I've seen for RBR that's nobody even asks money, I think. Maybe some donation. But,
So I have the Richard Burns Rally box in front of me, and a couple of things that we've not mentioned that are on their same one, that are on their kind of bullet point list on the back of the box. It mentions dynamic weather. What did you guys think about the weather that was in Richard Burns Rally?
Well, it's not really dynamic. It is dynamic per stage. So if you're doing an event, if you're doing a full rally, one stage might be dry and the next stage might be wet. And one of the great dynamic thing, or at least was great at the time, I think most of the rally games do it now, is that if it was raining in the previous and then you go on to the next stage, you may have no rain, but you've still got a wet surface and things like that. So the surface varied quite a lot. But there was no variance of weather. If it was raining at the start of the stage, it'd be raining at the end of the stage. There was no variance to the weather in that respect.
So did you feel like the physics and the slip of the surfaces was pretty good there, or not?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I used to find wet tarmac was better than tarmac. Anyway, in terms of how it felt. I think wet mud is done well, but it's one of my, if not, I think it's my least favourite surface. It's bloody awful. Like, the car doesn't turn, and then when it turns too much. And
the really twisty Japanese stages when it's raining.
Yeah.
It's like just, that's an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there may be a way to better set the car up for the rain, but you're not going to do that because unless you're expecting the whole rally to take place in the rain, you wouldn't do that, would you? Because you're going to find yourself on a dry stage next time round. But still, I think you're probably limited more by the surface there anyway, so I don't know how much with setup you'd really be able to do, for instance, to get it to turn in better. Like, it's not turning in better because there's no bloody grip, or it's aquaplaning across some giant puddle or whatever. So
yeah. The other thing that's on the list that we haven't touched on yet is the spectators. Now, I know myself that I thought you actually couldn't run them over.
You can kill them.
The guys that are in the middle of the racing surface who just kind of run out of the way. I actually thought you couldn't hit them, and then in like
you weren't going fast enough, Tim.
Yeah. Well, it was like in like 2020 or so, when I was making videos for the YouTube channel of each stage, I was obviously fast enough then, and I was like, oh, you can actually hit them. He didn't get out of the way fast
and it
enough.
Fades to red.
Yeah.
Fades. It's the same if you hit one. No, it's the same if you hit spectators when you go off.
I mean, I have those spectators that are standing by the roadside, but not those ones that are running. I haven't hit them.
You can
ever,
hit animals as well. Fades to red. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple There's one on one of the Japanese stages, especially where he stood in the middle of the road, and I'm now so fast going through that section that I actually pass on his right hand side, and he actually
Yeah.
moves
Yeah, I
like-
think I know
like-
the one you mean, Tim.
like after.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like but that really never happened before like 2020 when I revisited. I was never fast enough before that.
To,
but
to
I
actually
think now,
catch them.
yeah,
You're never
I
fast
now
enough to
have
kill a marshal.
the actual memory of these stages is actually imprinted in my head now, I think.
There's one on the Sweet Lamb stage, which Simon, you'll love. I strongly recommend Sweet Lamb. You know the stage, Sweet Lamb, in real life, right? Yeah, yeah. Where you're coming down the mountain and the car is really overtaken by momentum. And so you're hitting the limiter basically in your top gear. And this guy, he's just standing there, and like at one point I shouted in VR, I like shouted something like "Get out of the way," or something, and my wife was like, "What on earth is going on?" Yeah, but I probably was very animated at the time. But like the funny thing, as you say, Tim, is that now on that stage I've learned to position the car a little bit to the right, because you're kind of tobogganing down this hill, right? If you want to position the car appropriately, you have to have made that decision 100 meters before. So you start to
you have to be ready
or
for
get
it.
him over there, and then so I've started to make sure I'm more to the right of the road so that I do pass by him if he's hanging in too late. Did you have anything else off the box you wanted to go through?
No, not really. I have the Japanese one. I have the PC Gamer re-release up on the shelf behind me, but the original releases and things. I mean, it has a 2004 Sim Racing Awards thing from Black Hole Motorsports, which obviously doesn't exist anymore.
Those were the days.
And then the PC Gamer quote is "porno for petrol heads" as the quote. But yeah,
not many game titles have word porn on
That's
it.
true. But yeah, it's I mean, it's just really cool to see Richard Burns', face profile on the box here, and to kind of remember him and everything. Like it's weird to think about that it's kind of using his name and it's still out there and stuff. And I've been actually bought this Japanese version from a Japanese auction, and on the same site there's like one of his 2001 Argentine trophies is on the same auction site and stuff. So it's just really nice that he's remembered in this way.
Yeah, it reminded me that the driver models are still the original driver models that they have in the game, and they haven't replaced them. They're more upgraded them, and I think that's very cool.
Yeah.
And you still get, during the rally school, you still get to share a Red Bull with Richard Burns.
Giant Red Bull.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other area that the overhaul brings in is a complete overhaul to pace notes. Which for one, like, it's by default, essentially it gives you the default Robert Reed pace notes from Richard Burns Rally, which uses I don't know what the term would be, but it's the system of words, so it's easy left, fast right, and things like that. Personally, I have a much bigger preference for numbered pace notes, so I want 6 right, 6 left, and so on. I also have a particular preference, which I simply cannot explain why my brain prefers this, but I want a higher number to be a tighter corner.
I'm the same.
And there are various mods, the various pace note packs that you can download where people have created their own sets of pace notes, and in all of these different configurations potentially. So you can try whichever way round to find out what your preference would be. Is that what your preference is then? Higher for a tighter corner, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different systems out there, and people like have their own tweaks. But typically I don't like the kind of Colin McRae style notes where it's what gear you should be in. Because it doesn't work for me at all. My brain doesn't work like that.
I don't think it works really, because rally cars, especially more modern rally cars, have so much torque that you could be in a lot of different gears.
Yeah, and it just, I don't know whether it's just me growing up watching it on TV, and so like this is what I kind of learned pace notes are. But yeah, I use a system where, roughly speaking, it's about the numbers about kind of every 10 degrees almost. So you go to kind of a 6, and then you start getting into like you basically get 90s and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I don't actually mind the kind of the wordy Robert Reed notes. They were all right. But yeah, the kind of the gear calls, I mean, I can use them, but like my brain it's like I'm fighting against it. It's like I have to go. It's like it's been read in like German, and I'm having to try and remember my high school German and kind of do the translation in my head. It sort of isn't at all natural to me.
What's your preference, Terry?
I really don't have one at the time. I have to admit that I don't consider myself kind of a rallying expert in any way right now, because I don't. The pace note listening is really, really difficult, and even back then with RBR Online, I had to kind of memorize all the few stages that we had back then.
Do you use English pace notes or Finnish? Because there are Finnish
English,
packs, aren't there?
I know. I don't think it really matters to me if it's English or Finnish. In a way, the original read style, that's like medium, fast, easy stuff, it makes more sense to me than numbers. I don't really have to do a conversion in my mind.
Yeah.
But it's also a bit lacking, I guess, in the description. And I think we briefly talked about it privately, that the best would be to just do your own notes and build up a system in it that way, and slowly learn the.
And obviously the facility to do that exists. Yeah, the facility to create your own notes. I've yet to sit my wife in front of the microphone to read out 3, 4, and so on. Tim, do you have a preference?
I like the original ones, but there is just because it popped in my head, there is an arcade rally game that just came out recently where it has like an angry German shouting at you.
Yeah.
And it's just basically telling you to turn and turn more, which
nice. I think the mod I'm using is Janne. Is it Janne or Janne? I think Janne is a Finnish guy, and he's shouting at me. I'm not sure I'm going to stick with him because he is.
Yeah, I don't like shouting.
Yeah, it's a bit too shouty, actually. I've downloaded another one, but I haven't tried it yet. Sorry.
Briefly on the personal stuff, I was watching some onboard stuff from like I think early 90s. I think it was Kankkunen. He uses English notes. But then there were every now and then some like a Finnish word. I can't remember what it was, or a Finnish term that does I guess have an English equivalent or something. It's kind of interesting. It took just a.
What would be the approximate?
I can't remember what the word is.
Oh, okay.
It's maybe Kirra, which kind of means like Titans, which doesn't really make why
are you saying that?
I don't know. Yeah. But then again, every driver has personal pace notes.
Yeah, and I've watched a lot of onboards recently, and been listening quite tightly to pace notes, because the more you sort of lock it into your mind, it sort of soaks in, and it's quite interesting to hear some of the different aspects. One thing I think is missing here, and I'm not sure, there might be a mod out there that does this, is plus and minus calls for cambers, which Colin McRae's stuff always had his onboard footage, not the game. Colin McRae's onboard footage with, I can't remember his co-driver name. Anyway.
I kind of hadn't thought about that. I would have expected, when they're talking about the tightness of the turn, that they would kind of include the camber, as a part of.
It really matters, yeah.
Mental calculation that they would do and things like that.
It's really it's just a personal thing for drivers, how much information they want. Also,
but I mean, if you think a left 3 minus or a left 3 plus, you're going to take a very different approach to those two corners.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, interesting.
But I mean,
consider with pace notes. when it comes to learning them, and
Well, I mean,
you kind of want more information in some ways, but it's also a lot harder to process it.
Yeah, exactly.
In advance, and how much in advance, and
you can't keep
it's
up
a whole
with
thing.
it.
Yeah, it's really.
I mean,
that actually might be something that is actually that's missing from the realism of stuff. I mean, we've all seen rally clips where basically you have 10 rally cars in a row go off at the same corner. I don't think I've ever experienced in a rally sim or rally game where the pace notes are slightly incorrect.
Well, here we go, Tim, because I was about to move on to one of the great features that they've added, which is a pace note editor. So indeed, I've only used this once so far, but essentially I was on one of the finish stages, Makola, I think it's called, where there was a 300 meters of just right foot booting, followed, and the next two calls were 6 left, 6 right. So I'm like, well, I'm keeping the boot in because they're 6. By the way, 6 was fast corners. And then it just threw in a left 3. So it's like by the time I'm halfway through the left 6, I've got no time to brake for that left 3, and I'm dead. So I was able to pop open while my car lay upside down in the gravel. I think it's a double right click of the mouse to bring up the editor, and I added in caution in front of those 3 calls. Just because I mean that's one of my things. It's like Taro says, as a driver you have certain things. If I throw in caution, that means you should be braking. You probably should be braking right now if the word caution has come out. So the pace note editor is actually really good. And what the guys who are taking it much more seriously than probably any of us do is actually perform a recce on stages as you would in real life, and do the recce and decide if there are any pace note amendments they need to make during that recce.
Yeah, that's such a huge aspect of rallying that I actually find it really hard to even comprehend how difficult that is.
Yeah.
They basically just I assume go through the course at a slow pace, and they have to guess.
Yeah.
Based on their experience, how fast they're going to be able to go around a turn, and then when you watch the actual footage of these rally drivers going around these turns where they cannot see what's coming up ahead of them, they have to have complete faith in what's been noted down.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know that even Richard Burns' rally gets across how just utterly insane that process is.
Well, and complete faith in the person reading it out as well, of course.
Yeah.
Like who is also got complete faith in the driver not to kill both of them. But the in the in the early days when Richard Burns' rally was released, I remember reading stories of people like having their mate sitting next to them reading out, and they would do recce's, note down the pace notes, and then do a stage, do each stage with somebody live reading out the pace notes, and describing out of some of the best times they'd had in of sort of camaraderie between the two mates.
That's great.
It's pretty cool. I think the current system where there are so many people making their own sets that you can download, and there's lots of different languages added as well now, because obviously Richard Burns' rally only had so many languages for the pace notes, I think. Then it's as good as it can get, and with the editor in place. What I don't know with the editor, though I assume you can probably record a new, if you want to add in, Tero's obscure Finnish word, then you could probably do that, right?
Yeah, I haven't looked into it either. I think I saw Janne's video on it when it wasn't new or updated. There were actually a couple of ways you could do it, but I can't remember. I think maybe you could just hit record and state your notes for different corners, and it would record it, but I don't remember how. Would it be just like a single audio file and you would then have to edit it, or how it works? But nothing stops you from adding your own notes, but I don't know how easy it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that you can necessarily add in completely new words, can you, without replacing what exists? Because you're essentially taking the.
I think you can.
Can you? Okay.
I
Oh,
would
no, I
say
have
so.
seen that
I
actually.
honestly
Yeah, you're
don't
right.
know exactly sure, but yeah.
No, I've seen some videos of somebody using one that's definitely using completely new words. That's right. Yeah.
I did
So
actually.
it does exist. Yeah.
Yeah, I did think it was just replacing like the audio sample basically of the note system or whatever, but it's not just that. It's more complicated or sophisticated these days, at least. I think.
No, I think
yeah.
you're quite right. So you can, essentially build a very customized pace note pack if that was your decision. Right. Have we got anything else RBR we want to talk about? Go on, Simon.
One thing I would
bring it home.
Yeah, or I mean, it's thinking about the future, like almost what happens with this. There's obviously a thriving community. I don't know how much headroom there is in this to do much else. I don't know when it comes to kind of you mentioned there's the kind of new physics. I can't remember the initialization. It was NGP or whatever.
NGP, yeah.
I mean, I don't know how. I haven't looked into it enough to know, but I don't know, like, can they actually model different suspension types, or are they having to kind of like pseudo do stuff to kind of try and mimic it? Can they, so I don't know, can they do like a proper 4-link solid rear axle or not? I've no idea, is everything just basically McPherson struts trying to simulate some other type of suspension and stuff? When it comes to kind of other components, I really don't know. The fact that so much of the game is obviously as it was suggests that there's not this easy ability to kind of radically modify stuff. It does seem to be very much kind of going around the edges of what's in the core program. So I mean, obviously people can keep adding new cars. I don't think the game particularly needs that. They can keep adding new stages and kind of
new categories for offline championships as well.
Yeah, I mean, what's possible in terms of actual performance in terms of the game, I don't know. It's not like I don't know how the engines handle certain things. So maybe kind of actually, what we've got is as good as they're going to be in terms of detail and anything else. It's just a case of you get more. And again, there's quite a lot in there. And I don't know. I don't think it needs more. It's more the case of like, well, my hopes of a new groundbreaking rally title being released anytime soon that takes away the need for us to rely on this 20-year-old game is not very high at all. I was actually thinking the only kind of other rally content I've actually played since Richard Burns Rally came out is probably in a set of Corsa. They've got the Audi Quattro and they've got the Toyota Sleeker, and that's the two rally cars in there.
Yeah.
And that's it. And
iRacing has a Rallycross and
I mean, I've not tried. I've not played iRacing since I had to pay for it, basically.
And I think Automobilista 2 have Rallycross as well.
Yeah,
I've tried to Rallycross cars in iRacing and AMS, not recently, our AMS 2, but yeah, it's not great in iRacing. Obviously, it's just also just Rallycross cars, and there's just a few cars and a few tracks. It's okay, but there's some tire stuff that I guess affects kind of more the Rallycross cars because there's less lateral grip, which is kind of makes the driving weirder. You have to drive more straightforward, and yeah.
Has anybody in the community tried to like find out like where the engine is, if it's like lost, if it's still out there somewhere? I know that if you go to the old game website address, it redirects you to Square Enix's site. So I assume they hold the website domain, which I think is fairly normal, is that they'll hold on to all of the old games website addresses and just basically renew them because they don't care about the cost. But if they have this engine sat somewhere, if it's it's such a shame.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the source code is available to anybody at the moment, and yeah, I mean, the problem
I would
is
assume someone
over
has
20
asked,
years it may not still exist. You know,
That's also
companies have a big clear out of their
Yeah.
archive software, and it's,
Maybe Eero has it.
yeah, maybe. I mean, he mentioned in the interview, in fact, that his son, he was getting his son into it, right, with the
Oh, yeah.
NGP physics, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's actually one of the coolest things I've ever heard. Is, you know, the original developer using a mod for the next generation, you know, coming through. That's actually one of the totally coolest things that I've ever read. Yeah, it really is.
But going back to what Simon alluded to, you know, the future for this, you know, our hope lies with things like iRacing adding this type of content, or AMS2, or Assetto Corsa Evo, potentially having this sort of stuff. But whether, because the sim isn't necessarily dedicated to this type of content, how much focus it will ever get is negligible. And how, like, this, you know, the large audience for this, as we covered earlier, you know, they've got Richard Burns Rally. So if something new comes out that is, you know, better but costs a great deal, you know, imagine a scenario where it's 50 quid for the base package and then you've got to pay 15 quid for each new car, or things like that. The sort of iRacing model, you know, can it sustain that type of user numbers when they're just going to say, well, I can just be in RSF instead, doing online rallies and having a great time.
Yeah, and in this current climate, or even how it's been for at least the last 10 years, where everything is about pleasing a board, you know, and getting funding approved for something like this. I mean, rallying isn't at the forefront of motorsport like it actually was in the past, and you know, we've talked about how rallying is popular in, you know, some areas where people might not be able to afford a expensive computer and stuff like that, because the components aren't made there, you know, and yeah, it's a tough sell, yeah, getting something made that is actually going to focus on simulation versus the accessibility of an arcade title as well. It's just, I fear that we may actually never get something like this ever again.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I mean, if you think if EA have the licensing for WRC now, the developers, ex-Codemasters guys within EA, if they wanted to punt, you know, if they have the skills and so on to actually put something solidly 100% sim, they're not going to get it signed off at board level, as you say.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that is an option or a possibility is that, you know, you can basically take any, in theory, any title should be able to do asphalt rallying. You know, do that in Assetto Corsa Evo, whatever. And as I say, in Assetto Corsa, they've got some rally cars in there.
I think some RBR stages have been ported as mods to Assetto Corsa.
Yeah, that's been, you know, back and forth.
Ones,
yeah.
And so, like, I think there's a chance we could see, well, maybe it's already out there, like you're saying, but, you know, like, the hard surface stuff maybe, but, you know, when are we gonna, you know, unless there's some shock announcement and, like, along with modelling the backs of road signs in the Eifel region, like, of course, they'll also say, oh, we're doing loose surfaces as well. I mean, I think in a way, possibly the best bet for this is actually either some kind of private sort of project, or you have something really niche, like, you know, you can like the Mud Runner and Snow Runner games, where it's someone who's basically just really had an interest in pursuing a kind of idea and gone and done it, and maybe you end up with some sort of sandbox thing that allows people to then put in stages and whatever else.
Yeah,
I don't know.
BeamNG has some rally stuff going on, doesn't it?
Yeah, they actually seem interesting, and for me, that actually might be kind of biggest bet, you know, because they seem to have people that are genuinely kind of passionate about that kind of racing, and also they don't seem to be completely focused on what would probably make them the most money. You've only got to look at their patch notes to see how insane they are about that. What they're actually building and everything. They're so detailed that that's probably our best hope, honestly.
Yeah, though the pace notes part is missing, isn't it? Of course, and whether they'll integrate something like that, I don't know. But like iRacing added the Mount Washington tarmac rally stage, right? And there's no pace notes, so you jump onto it and you've got no idea what's coming up. So it's, unless you're going to sort of learn it. I don't know how long it is. I think it's maybe 10 kilometers or something. Unless you're going to learn it or recce it with a friend and have them with a notepad, that's a very, very niche scenario, isn't it? So
yeah, for things like hill climb like that, I'm not sure necessarily whether the notes are used or not, but yeah,
they don't usually.
Yeah, that's the.
They do sometimes. In cars that have passenger seats, quite often you see on hill climbs.
You kind of need that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kind of difficulty with that is that I don't know necessarily whether that hit as well as iRacing wanted it to.
No, I don't think it did at all.
I don't think
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might have pushed them back a bit. If they were intending to go with point-to-point racing a little bit more, that might have actually push that down as an option. But also you've got things like the Pikes Peak hill climb has been exclusive to Sony since before GT7 was released and isn't in GT7. That's hugely frustrating to me.
It was in one of it was in GT6, was it?
One
of them, I think.
The last thing it was in was Dirt Rally 1.
Right.
And it wasn't in Dirt Rally 2, and they said that because Sony had signed it. And if you look in GT7, the only thing that's in there that's Pikes Peak is they actually have some of the cars that have raced Pikes Peak, but they don't have Pikes Peak. So that's something, as a licensing person, that I find hugely frustrating, is when someone's just kind of sat on something that could really, if that was in an iRacing, I actually think that would sell. Where the previous mountain climb that they've put in there obviously didn't do that well.
It should sell more, I would have thought, through the popularity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Gran Turismo does have dirt circuits, doesn't it? And they're awful. Frankly, I'm quite a fan of Gran Turismo, and I will talk up its tarmac physics, circuit physics, but the dirt physics are rubbish.
Yeah.
Sorry, Yamauchi-san. Right. Well, I think that's about all we can go on about with Richard Burns Rally, and I'm quite amazed that we managed to go on for a full 2 hours about one game. It just goes to show quite what a legendary piece of equipment this software is. And I think, essentially in the annals of all the racing sims, this is near the top, as in terms of influence, in terms of its importance to the genre. And of course, how good it is to drive. It's it's one of the greatest sims of all time.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, thank you for listening, everybody, and we'll see you hopefully in less than 7 months. But don't put out too much hope, guys. All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye all.
Bye.